Hello fam! These are the solutions to the first check your understanding for Unit 9. These solutions are for stating hypotheses. They don't really require very much explanation. In the prompt, I tried to highlight the phrasing that indicated to me what my alternative would be, so hopefully that is helpful. One thing that I would like to highlight for all of these is that when you state your hypotheses, make sure that the number that you're using is the same for both the null and the alternative. The null is always equal, so make sure HO in every single one of these is equal. And then, like I said, the wording that told me the symbol for the alternative, I tried to highlight. That all being said, the last thing that I want to mention on stating hypotheses is that when you are defining your variable, you want to do the best that you can. I know that it can be challenging to know what exactly do I need to include and how specific do I need to be. So when you're stating your hypotheses, the best advice that I can give you is just to do the best you can and include what you think is important. If yours is slightly different than mine, you're probably okay, but you want it to match pretty closely. So that's the first two. And then this is the last two. Then the next thing that we had for this set of Check Your Understandings was on page 707. So the first section, you're comparing your p-value to your alpha. The ones that I personally find the most challenging are ones like C. Like those ones are really, really sometimes confusing for me. So make sure that you are being careful about how many zeros is after your decimal. Other than that, I do okay. I have mentioned in almost every class that even teaching this for as many years as I have and several times each year, I honestly still have to say to myself, if the p-value is low, reject the hoe. So if that's something that is challenging for you, don't let that hinder your confidence. Just memorize that phrase and do the best that you can. On number 2, it's asking what is the correct interpretation for the p-value. And some of you guys have asked what are some keywords that I should look for, or what might be a good way to prepare myself to identify how to interpret these things. And I hadn't thought about it until one of you guys asked me that, and I realized that for a lot of these, talking about that would probably be really helpful. So when you're interpreting a p-value, you are looking for assume HO is true. So the first thing that the answer option has to have is some statement that HO is true. The next thing is you need to have your p-value, and it's going to use the word chance or probability, or sometimes both. And then the last one is that you're looking for something that says the chance we would get the sample we got, so our sample, or more extreme. And it's the more extreme that I think can sometimes be confusing, but notice when we do a hypothesis test, what we're testing is if the alternative is true, and the alternative is an inequality. So we're testing that it's greater than 50, which means it could be 51, 52, 53. We're not testing that it's a specific value. We're testing if it's a range of values. So when we look at the sample that we got, what we're really looking at is our sample value and more extreme. So in this case, it would be our sample value or bigger. So the only one that matches that, A and B, are not an option because they don't say anything about the null being true. So C, D, and E have that phrasing, but D has an issue because it says assuming that more than 50% support the tax increase. That's the alternative. We don't assume that the alternative is true. So then it's down between C and E, and the only one that then matches is C. We have the assume the null is true, there's an 18% probability, and that we would get the sample we got or more extreme by chance alone. This one is saying that the null hypothesis is true, and you never want to mention anything about the null being true. You never want to give any indication or get close to anything that says our conclusion is that the null is true or anything like that. So we're not testing if the null is true. We're testing if we have evidence against the null. So this is indicating that we're testing if the null is true because it's saying there's an 18% chance that it's true. Well, no, the whole problem is built on the idea that the null is true. So E is not an option. And then last is what's the most appropriate conclusion. I got this wrong. You can see that I whited out my answer because this was another situation in which I needed to really go slow and tell myself if the p-value is low, reject the hoe. So those are the check your understandings for lesson 70 and lesson 71.